The black moon rose without warning. Not red, not silver, black, a color the wolves had feared for 500 years. Snowstorms swallowed the towers of Varkora while alarm bells screamed across the kingdom beneath the darkened sky. Giant fortress gates slammed shut. Warriors armed themselves with silver blades. Entire packs dropped to their knees as ancient terror spread through their instincts like poison. Because the old legends had returned, and every wolf alive knew what that meant. Far below the fortress cliffs, rivers froze beneath unnatural shadows while red lightning split the heavens above the empire of wolves. The sacred fires burning across the palace walls flickered violently as if even the flames feared what was coming. At the center of the chaos stood a human girl, barefoot in the snow. Silver markings crawled across her skin like living light, glowing brighter with every terrified heartbeat echoing through the kingdom. Wind whipped through her dark hair while frightened wolves surrounded her from a distance, unable to move closer. Some growled, some trembled, others bowed their heads in fear. Because the markings on her body matched the forbidden stories buried deep within royal history. The Moonless Bloodline. A cursed lineage erased from the world centuries ago after the fall of the ancient werewolf empire. According to legend, they were not born to rule wolves. They were born to judge them. And wherever the moonless descendants walked, kingdoms drowned in blood. High above the frozen courtyard, the Alpha King stepped forward through falling snow with a blood-stained sword hanging at his side. Kael Draven, the undefeated ruler feared by every Alpha across the continent. Warriors who survived battle against him called him merciless. Enemies called him death itself. Yet standing before that human girl beneath the black moon, even the great Alpha King looked shaken. Because his wolf recognized her instantly. Not as an enemy. Not as a curse. As his mate. The silver flames surrounding the fortress exploded violently as Kael moved toward her through the terrified crowd. Noble wolves shouted warnings. Elders demanded the girl's execution. Guards tightened their grip on silver weapons waiting for the order to strike. But Kael ignored all of them. His silver eyes remained locked on the frightened human standing alone beneath the darkened sky. The kingdom expected him to kill her. Instead, he reached for her hand. And the moment the Alpha King touched her hand, every wolf in the kingdom knew their world was about to end. The wind carried the smell of blood long before the soldiers reached the gates. Torches trembled violently against the stone walls of Varkora, the greatest werewolf kingdom ever built, while thousands stood frozen beneath the midnight sky. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Even the restless horses tied along the fortress courtyard lowered their heads as if they sensed something ancient approaching through the darkness. Then the gates opened. A single armored rider emerged from the black fog beyond the mountains. Silver eyes glowed beneath a hood stained with ash. The soldiers behind him marched slowly, dragging broken enemy banners through the mud while chains rattled from dozens of captured alphas forced onto their knees. Some of those prisoners had ruled territories feared for centuries. Men whose names once silenced entire armies now looked terrified to raise their eyes toward the rider ahead of them. Because Kael Draven had returned. And war always ended the same way when the Alpha King stepped onto a battlefield. With silence, rain began falling across the kingdom as the massive fortress doors groaned shut behind the army. The sound echoed through the capital like a warning bell. High above the courtyard, nobles watched from marble balconies wrapped in heavy fur cloaks stitched with golden wolf crests. Their expressions remained carefully controlled, but fear lingered behind their eyes. Kael removed his hood slowly. A fresh scar cut across the side of his throat, disappearing beneath the collar of his black armor. Blood streaked one side of his face, though none of it belonged to him. The crowd lowered their heads immediately. Not out of loyalty. Out of survival. The Alpha King dismounted without assistance and walked across the stone courtyard while chains scraped behind him. Nobody dared step into his path, not even the royal guards. One of the captured alphas suddenly spat blood onto the ground near Kale's boots. Several nobles gasped. The prisoner laughed weakly through shattered teeth. "You think fear makes you powerful," he hissed. "One day your own kingdom will tear you apart." Kale stopped walking. Rainwater dripped from the edge of his dark hair as he turned slowly toward the chained alpha. His silver eyes carried no anger, no arrogance, nothing human at all. That terrified the prisoner more than rage ever could. Kale crouched in front of him. "You burned villages filled with children," he said quietly. "You fed prisoners to your wolves while they begged for mercy." The prisoner's breathing grew uneven. Kale tilted his head slightly. "And now you want dignity." The courtyard fell completely still. Then the Alpha King rose to his full height and nodded once toward the guards. The execution happened instantly. Steel flashed beneath the torchlight. The prisoner's body collapsed into the mud while terrified silence spread through the gathered crowd. Kale never looked back at the corpse. He simply continued toward the fortress entrance while thunder rolled across the kingdom overhead. Inside the palace walls, servants hurried through endless corridors carrying crimson banners marked with the royal crest of Varkora. Preparations for the Crimson Moon ceremony had already begun. Every 100 years, the ancient ritual chose the queen destined to stand beside the reigning Alpha King. Noble daughters from the strongest bloodlines across the empire traveled for months to compete for the honor. Alliances were formed during the ceremony. Wars were prevented through it. Entire pact territories rose or fell depending on which bloodline gained royal favor. But this year felt different. The tension inside the kingdom had grown dangerous. Whispers traveled faster than wildfire through the halls of the fortress. Some believed Kale had become too powerful after the war. Others feared the growing influence of the High Elders, whose control over ancient laws allowed them to manipulate noble houses against one another like pieces on a board. Every family wanted the throne. Every alpha wanted control. And the Crimson Moon ceremony would decide who gained it. At the center of the fortress stood the Hall of Fangs, a massive chamber carved entirely from black stone. Enormous wolf statues towered beside rows of iron pillars while silver fire burned endlessly inside giant braziers along the walls. The High Elders gathered there beneath the glowing moon symbol engraved into the floor. Elder Merrick rested both hands on his cane as he stared toward the entrance. Age had bent his body but not his influence. One word from him could destroy entire bloodlines. "He grows harder to control," another elder muttered carefully. Merrick's eyes narrowed. Control was never possible with Kale Draven. He refuses every political arrangement. He ignores sacred traditions. He rejects mating contracts. "And yet," Merrick interrupted coldly, "none of you dared oppose him while he bled for this kingdom." Silence followed immediately. Nobody challenged the old man. Because despite their fear of Kale, they feared instability even more. A kingdom without a ruler became a kingdom at war. Heavy footsteps echoed outside the chamber. The elders straightened instantly. Kale entered the hall alone. The silver flames flickered violently the moment he crossed the doorway. His black cloak hung heavily from his shoulders, still wet from rain and battle. The scar along his throat looked even harsher beneath the firelight. One of the younger elders attempted a polite smile. "The kingdom celebrates your victory, your majesty." Kale removed his gloves slowly. "The kingdom celebrates survival." No warmth touched his voice. Merrick studied him carefully. "The Crimson Moon ceremony begins tomorrow night." Kale said nothing. "The noble houses are expecting your decision." Still silent. Another elder shifted nervously before speaking again. "You must choose a queen eventually." Kale's expression darkened almost invisibly. "I watched my father choose power over love," he said quietly. "I watched this kingdom execute my mother while nobles called it justice." The room stiffened. Nobody mentioned her. Not ever. Even after all these years, the memory remained poisonous inside the palace walls. Kale stepped closer to the silver flames. "She believed in fate," he continued, "in sacred bonds and prophecy." His eyes reflected cold firelight. "And fate rewarded her with death." The hall grew unbearably quiet. Kale turned toward the elders again. I do not need destiny to rule this kingdom. Then he walked past them without waiting for permission to leave. The door slammed shut behind him. Far below the royal chambers, hidden beneath endless servant corridors and storage halls, Lyra moved quietly through the palace kitchens carrying a basket of fresh herbs against her chest. Nobody important noticed servants. That was why she survived. Steam filled the underground corridors while cooks shouted across crowded kitchens preparing for the ceremony feast above. The scent of roasted meat and smoke clung heavily to the air. Lyra kept her head lowered as she passed groups of workers. Loose strands of dark hair framed her face beneath a faded hood, though nothing fully concealed the faint silver markings curling beneath the skin near her wrists. Whenever anyone noticed them, whispers followed. Cursed girl. Moon-touched. Bad omen. Some servants refused to eat beside her. Others crossed themselves whenever she walked past. Lyra learned long ago that silence hurt less than defending herself. An older servant woman suddenly grabbed her arm near the stairwell. You should not be wandering tonight, the woman whispered urgently. Lyra blinked. Why? The soldiers brought prisoners back from the war. The wolves are restless. Distant growls echoed faintly through the stone corridors, almost as if proving her point. The woman glanced nervously toward the ceiling before lowering her voice further. And tomorrow is the Crimson Moon ceremony. Strange things happen during old rituals. Lyra forced a small smile. Strange things happen here every day. The woman didn't laugh. Her eyes drifted toward the silver markings beneath Lyra's sleeve. Fear flickered across her face before she stepped away quickly. Lyra remained still for a moment after she left. Then she continued walking alone. Inside her tiny room beneath the fortress, moonlight spilled through a narrow crack in the stone wall. Lyra placed the basket onto a wooden table before slowly rolling up her sleeve. The silver markings had spread further. Thin glowing lines curled across her skin like roots beneath ice. Her breathing tightened. They always grew brighter near a full moon. And tomorrow night, the crimson moon will rise above the kingdom. A sudden scream echoed somewhere far above the servant halls. Lyra froze instantly. Another scream followed. Then silence. She moved toward the tiny window instinctively. From the distant courtyard, she could barely see soldiers dragging another body through the rain while thunder rolled over the fortress towers. At the center of it all stood the Alpha King himself. Even from that distance, something about him felt wrong. Not cruel. Not monstrous. Worse. Alone. Kale lifted his head slightly, as if sensing something watching him. For one brief second, Lyra's breath caught. His silver eyes turned toward the exact tower where she stood hidden behind stone. The air inside her room suddenly felt painfully cold. Then the torches below flickered violently, and the silver markings beneath her skin began to glow. The fortress of Varkora had witnessed coronations, executions, wars, and blood oaths carved into stone by kings long forgotten. Yet on the night of the Crimson Moon ceremony, even the ancient walls seemed uneasy. Thousands gathered beneath the towering arches of the Hall of Fangs, while crimson fire blazed inside silver braziers lining the chamber. Massive banners carrying the crests of noble wolf bloodlines hung from the ceiling like warning flags over a battlefield waiting to erupt. No music played. The silence carried too much tension for celebration. Above the ceremonial hall, the moon glowed dark red through the enormous open dome carved into the ceiling. Its color painted the black stone floor like spilled blood. The noble family stood separated according to rank, each group guarded by warriors dressed in ceremonial armor. Wealth and power filled the room through jeweled gowns, silver weapons, golden markings, and eyes glowing faintly beneath the torchlight. But beneath all the elegance lurked fear. Because every family present understood one truth. The woman chosen tonight would not simply become queen. She would influence the future of the entire werewolf empire. At the highest platform overlooking the hall, the high elders sat upon elevated stone seats shaped like wolf thrones. Their expressions remained unreadable while servants moved carefully around them carrying sacred scrolls and silver bowls filled with ceremonial ash. Elder Marek lifted his gaze toward the entrance as the massive doors slowly opened. The room straightened instantly. Kale Draven entered alone. Black ceremonial robes replaced his battle armor, though nothing softened the dangerous presence surrounding him. The scar along his throat remained visible beneath the open collar near his neck, standing out sharply against pale skin. His silver eyes swept across the crowded hall once. That single glance silenced every whisper immediately. Noble alphas lowered their heads respectfully while daughters from powerful bloodlines stared openly at the king with carefully practiced admiration. Kale noticed none of it. Or perhaps he simply did not care. He walked toward the throne platform with the same cold control he carried onto battlefields. Every step echoed through the chamber like a countdown toward something inevitable. Elder Marek rose slowly. By the authority of the ancient pacts and the sacred moon above us, the Crimson Moon ceremony begins. Silver flames burst higher around the hall. Several noble daughters stepped forward from the crowd. One after another, they approached the Alpha King according to ancient tradition. Each woman represented power, territory, political alliance, military strength. The first carried the crest of the Northern Ice Pacts embroidered across a white gown trimmed with silver fur. She bowed gracefully before Kale, her voice smooth and rehearsed. "My king, my bloodline has defended Varkora's borders for centuries. Together, our union would strengthen the kingdom for generations." Kale looked at her briefly. Then away. "Next." The woman froze. Shock flashed across her face before humiliation quickly replaced it. She stepped back into the crowd while whispers spread quietly through the nobles. Another candidate approached almost immediately. Then another. And another. Each spoke of loyalty, honor, strength. Kale rejected every single one without hesitation. Some of the women tried hiding their embarrassment. Others looked furious. The atmosphere inside the hall grew tighter with every passing moment. Near the front of the crowd, Seraphine finally stepped forward. Unlike the others, she showed no nervousness at all. The daughter of the High Elder moved through the chamber like she already belonged beside the throne. Her dark emerald gown shimmered beneath the crimson moonlight while gold jewelry wrapped elegantly around her wrists and throat. Beautiful, poised, dangerous. Several nobles visibly relaxed when she approached. Of all the candidates present, Seraphine had always been considered the most likely future queen. Her bloodline carried enormous political influence, and unlike many others, she understood how to manipulate power without revealing her intentions too early. She stopped directly before Kale. For the first time that evening, a faint smile touched someone's lips. "Your Majesty," she said softly, "the kingdom needs stability after war." Kale stared at her silently. Seraphine held his gaze without fear. Around them, noble families watched almost breathlessly. This was the alliance everyone expected. The perfect political union. The strongest bloodlines joining together beneath the crimson moon. Seraphine slowly extended her hand according to ceremonial tradition. Together, she continued, "We can give Varkora peace." For a moment the hall remained completely still. Then Kale stepped past her. Not even a touch. Not even acknowledgement. The rejection struck harder than a slap across the face. A ripple of stunned whispers spread through the chamber instantly. Seraphine's expression almost cracked before she recovered herself. Almost. But Kale had already ascended the throne platform without looking back. The silence afterward felt unbearable. Elder Marek's jaw tightened slightly. "Your Majesty," he warned carefully, "the ceremony requires a selection." Kale rested one hand against the arm of the throne. "I see no queen before me." The words sliced through the hall like a blade. Several noble leaders exchanged furious glances. Others looked nervous. Because Kale's refusal was no longer personal. It was political. And politics inside Varkora often ended in blood. Far beneath the ceremonial hall, Lyra balanced a silver tray carefully in trembling hands while hurrying through servant corridors crowded with exhausted workers. The kitchens had descended into chaos since the ceremony began above. More wine. More goblets. More ceremonial incense. Orders flew endlessly through the underground halls while servants rushed between staircases carrying supplies toward the nobles above. Lyra kept her hood lowered as she moved quickly through the confusion. A kitchen supervisor shoved another tray toward her. "Take this to the Hall of Fangs immediately." "I'm assigned below the lower corridor," Lyra answered quietly. "And I'm assigning you elsewhere now." The older woman glanced impatiently toward the crowded staircase. "Move." Lyra swallowed softly before obeying. The silver markings beneath her sleeves had been burning all evening. Something felt wrong inside the fortress tonight. Not dangerous in the ordinary sense. Worse. The closer she climbed toward the ceremonial hall, the colder the air became against her skin. By the time she reached the final staircase, her fingers had started trembling around the tray. Voices thundered faintly beyond the enormous doors ahead. Then suddenly, silence. Complete silence. Lyra slowed uncertainly. One of the guards near the entrance noticed her immediately. Servants aren't permitted inside during royal proceedings. She was ordered to deliver the ceremonial wine, another interrupted impatiently. The first guard cursed under his breath before stepping aside, quickly then. Lyra lowered her head and entered the hall. The moment she crossed the doorway, everything changed. The torches flickered violently. A freezing wind exploded through the chamber from nowhere. And above the fortress, the crimson moon turned black. Gasps erupted instantly across the hall. Several noblewomen stumbled backward in terror while warriors reached for weapons without understanding why. The silver flames surrounding the chamber darkened. Not extinguished. Darkened. As if shadow itself had swallowed the light. Lyra froze in the center of the hall. The tray slipped from her hands. Goblets shattered across the stone floor. Nobody looked at the broken glass. Every eye in the chamber had locked onto her. The black moon loomed directly overhead. A horrible silence spread through the hall as ancient fear crept across the faces of nobles and elders alike. Then Kale stood. The moment his eyes landed on Lyra, something inside him snapped violently awake. Heat surged beneath his skin. His wolf slammed against his chest with terrifying force. "Mate." The word tore through his mind like thunder. Kale's breathing roughened instantly. "Impossible. Humans could not be mates. The sacred bond belonged only to wolves." Yet the scent flooding the air around her wrapped itself around his instincts so powerfully that his entire body reacted before logic could intervene. His wolf wanted her. Protected. Claimed. Near him. Lyra slowly lifted her gaze toward the throne platform. The second their eyes met, the silver markings beneath her skin ignited brightly beneath her sleeves. A collective scream shattered the silence. "The Black Moon. It's happening again. Remove her. By the ancestors." Panic exploded throughout the chamber. Several nobles rushed backward while guards formed defensive lines around the elders. Fear spread faster than reason. Because everyone knew the legend. 500 years earlier, the moon had darkened exactly the same way before the fall of the ancient werewolf empire of Noctravos. Entire bloodlines vanished overnight. Cities burned. Wolves slaughtered one another in madness while the sky remained black for 7 straight nights. And according to forbidden records buried deep beneath Varkora. It began with a cursed woman. Elder Merrick rose violently from his seat, seized the human. Guards rushed forward immediately. Lyra stepped backward in terror as armored warriors surrounded her from every side. The room blurred beneath the chaos while frightened nobles shouted over one another. "I knew she was cursed. She brought darkness into the ceremony. Kill her before it spreads." Seraphine watched everything carefully from the crowd. Unlike the others, she was not panicking. She was calculating. Slowly, she stepped toward the elders while keeping her voice controlled enough for nearby nobles to hear. "The prophecy warned us," she said softly. "A moonless woman would bring ruin to the wolves." Fear spread even faster. "She cannot be allowed to live," Seraphine continued, "not after what we witnessed tonight." The crowd began agreeing immediately. Voices rose louder. Kill her. End it now. Lyra's breathing turned ragged as guards grabbed her arms roughly. I didn't do anything, she whispered. Nobody listened. One guard drew a blade. Kale moved before the weapon fully left its sheath. The sound of cracking bone echoed through the hall. Gasps erupted as the guard's body slammed violently across the stone floor after Kale struck him aside with monstrous force. The entire chamber fell silent again. Kale stood between Lyra and the guards now. His silver eyes glowed dangerously beneath the black moon overhead. Touch her again, he said quietly, and I will tear your arms from your body. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Even the elders looked shaken. Seraphine stared at Kale in disbelief. Not because he defended the girl. Because of the possessiveness in his voice. Elder Merrick descended from the platform slowly. Your Majesty, that creature threatens the kingdom. Kale never looked away from Lyra. She is under my protection. The statement struck the hall harder than thunder. The guards loosened their grip immediately. Lyra stumbled slightly as they released her. Before she could steady herself, her hand accidentally pressed against Kale's chest. The world seemed to stop. Kale's body went rigid beneath her touch. Then suddenly, his wolf dropped to its knees inside him. The Hall of Fangs remained frozen beneath the black moon. Nobody understood what they had just witnessed. Not the nobles gripping silver weapons with trembling hands. Not the elders staring at Kale in stunned disbelief. And certainly not Lyra, whose fingers still rested lightly against the Alpha King's chest while the air around them pulsed with unnatural tension. A king's wolf never bowed. Not to enemies. Not to gods. Not even to death. Yet inside Kale Draven, the beast feared across continents had lowered itself before a human girl. Kale stepped back abruptly. The movement broke the paralysis gripping the chamber. Take her away from here, Elder Merrick ordered sharply. No, Kale answered instantly. The cold authority in his voice silenced the room again. He turned toward Lyra. For the first time since entering the ceremony hall, fear fully reached her eyes, not the fear of death. The fear of becoming something dangerous without understanding why. Kale noticed it immediately. The instinct inside him tightened violently. Protect her. The command echoed through his body with terrifying force. His wolf had not calmed since the moment their eyes met. Every breath she took sharpened his senses further. Her scent lingered beneath the smoke and silver fire surrounding the chamber, pulling at him in ways he neither trusted nor understood. Which only made him angrier. At himself. At the bond. At fate. Kale extended his hand toward Lyra. The hall erupted with outrage. You cannot bring her into the royal quarters. She is cursed. The moon itself rejected her existence. Kale's silver gaze swept across the crowd. The fury inside those eyes crushed every remaining protest into silence. Then he looked back at Lyra again. Come with me. Her breathing trembled softly. Every instinct warned her to run. Yet somehow standing near him felt safer than remaining inside that hall full of terrified wolves. Slowly she placed her hand into his. The moment their skin touched, Kale's jaw tightened. Heat surged violently beneath his ribs. The bond deepened. The black moon hanging overhead flickered once before crimson slowly returned across its surface. That frightened the elders even more. Because the darkness had responded to her. And somehow. To him. Kale led Lyra out of the ceremonial hall while hundreds watched in horrified silence. Nobody dared stop them. The palace corridors felt different after that night. Quieter. Colder. Fear moved through Varkora faster than wildfire across dry land. Servants whispered behind closed doors. Guards avoided certain hallways. Entire sections of the fortress emptied whenever Lyra appeared. By sunrise, the rumors had already spread beyond the palace walls into the kingdom itself. The cursed human had bewitched the Alpha King. The Black Moon prophecy had returned. The end of the wolves had begun. Lyra felt every stare following her through the fortress. Even now, hours after the ceremony ended, the memory still clung painfully to her chest. The screaming. The hatred. The terror in their eyes. She sat quietly beside the large window inside one of the royal guest chambers, fingers tightening around a silver cup untouched for nearly an hour. Rain struck the glass outside while distant thunder rolled across the mountains surrounding Varkura. The room itself looked too luxurious for someone like her. Dark velvet curtains framed towering windows overlooking the kingdom below. Silver candles flickered softly against black stone walls carved with ancient wolf symbols. Everything about the chamber reminded her she did not belong there. A knock echoed suddenly against the door. Lyra stiffened instantly. The door opened before she could answer. Kale entered alone. The room seemed smaller the moment he stepped inside. He had removed the ceremonial robes from earlier, replacing them with a simple black tunic that exposed the scar along his throat more clearly beneath the candlelight. His silver eyes found her immediately. Lyra lowered hers. Neither spoke for several seconds. The silence felt strangely heavy. Not uncomfortable. Careful. Kale crossed the room slowly before placing a folded cloak near the edge of the bed. The nights grow colder near the eastern towers, he said. Lyra blinked softly. The statement caught her off guard. Not because of the words. Because he noticed. Kale rarely noticed things unrelated to war or politics. Yet since the ceremony, his senses tracked everything involving her without permission. Whether she had eaten. Whether she slept. Whether fear lingered in her expression. It irritated him endlessly. You moved me here to keep me prisoner, Lyra said quietly without looking up. Kale's expression hardened slightly. If you were my prisoner, there would be guards outside your door. Her eyes lifted toward him then. He stood several feet away, giving her space despite the dangerous tension pulling constantly between them. You heard what they said downstairs, she whispered. They think I'm dangerous. Kale stared at her for a long moment before answering. They are afraid of what they cannot control. And you? The question lingered between them. Rain battered the windows harder. Kale should have answered immediately. Instead, his silence revealed more than words. Because yes. Part of him feared her. Not physically. Something worse. The effect she had on him. The way his wolf reacted whenever she came near. The instinctive possessiveness growing stronger each hour. Kale finally spoke carefully. You will remain under my protection until I understand what happened during the ceremony. Lyra laughed softly then. Not with amusement. Exhaustion. You speak about me like I'm a problem to solve. Kale's jaw tightened. Before he could answer, movement outside the doorway interrupted them. Two servants carrying fresh linens froze instantly upon noticing Lyra inside the room. Their faces drained of color. One quickly lowered his gaze while the other made an ancient protective gesture against evil before hurrying away almost fast enough to trip over herself. Lyra noticed. Of course she noticed. Her expression dimmed slightly as silence settled again inside the chamber. Kale watched the reaction carefully. Something uncomfortable twisted beneath his ribs. Guilt. He was unfamiliar with the feeling. I did not ask for any of this, Lyra said quietly. Kale believed her. That made everything worse. Elsewhere inside the fortress, Seraphine stood alone within her private chambers while candlelight flickered across maps spread over a long wooden table. Several names had been marked in black ink. Noble houses. Alliances. Potential enemies. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table as she replayed the ceremony inside her mind again. Kale had rejected every noblewoman in the kingdom. Yet he protected a servant girl without hesitation. Worse. He looked at Lyra the way wolves looked at destiny. Seraphine's jealousy burned slowly beneath her calm expression. Not emotional jealousy. Political jealousy. She had spent years positioning herself beside the throne, years building influence among the elders while weaker nobles fought useless battles over territory and pride. The crown belonged to her. Then a human appeared and shattered everything in a single night. A quiet knock interrupted her thoughts. Enter. A tall nobleman stepped carefully into the room, Lord Valor, leader of one of the oldest wolf bloodlines in Varkura. The council grows restless, he said immediately. Seraphine poured dark wine into a silver goblet without offering him any. They should. Kale refuses to surrender the girl. He will, Seraphine answered calmly. Valor frowned, you sound certain. Her lips curved faintly. Every ruler has weaknesses. She approached the window, overlooking the fortress below. And once you find them, she continued softly, even kings begin to bleed. Valor studied her cautiously. The nobles demand action. Rumors about the prophecy are spreading through the kingdom. Seraphine's eyes darkened. Then we give them fear. Far beneath the fortress archives, hidden inside ancient underground chambers few still remembered existed, Seraphine descended narrow stone stairs carrying a lantern through layers of dust untouched for decades. Old records filled the underground vaults. Forbidden histories. Destroyed bloodlines. Curses buried by royal order. She stopped before an enormous shelf sealed with iron chains. Moonless bloodline. Even the title sent unease crawling through the darkness. Seraphine unlocked the chains slowly. Dust rose into the air as ancient scrolls shifted open beneath her hands. And then she saw it. A drawing. Silver markings identical to the ones spreading across Lyra's skin. For the first time since the ceremony, genuine fear flickered through Seraphine's eyes. Back above the fortress, night settled heavily across Varkora once again. Kale stood alone on the eastern balcony overlooking the kingdom while icy wind pulled through his dark hair. Ronan approached quietly beside him. Unlike most wolves, Kale's beta never looked intimidated standing near the king. Concerned, yes. Intimidated, never. You cannot keep her hidden forever, Ronan muttered. Kale's gaze remained fixed on the distant mountains. I'm not hiding her. You placed royal guards outside her chambers. Because someone will try to kill her. Ronan exhaled slowly, and if the prophecy is true. Kale's expression darkened. The words lingered heavily between them. Then suddenly, a scream tore through the fortress. Lyra! Kale moved instantly. The balcony cracked beneath the force of his leap as he sprinted through the corridors faster than any human eye could fully follow. Guards shouted in confusion while servants scattered aside. Another scream echoed ahead. By the time Kale reached Lyra's chambers, the door already hung broken from its hinges. Inside the room. Chaos. A masked assassin pinned Lyra against the wall while silver blades pressed dangerously near her throat. Blood stained the floor from the dead guards outside. Lyra struggled desperately beneath the attacker's grip, terror flooding her face. Kale's wolf exploded forward inside him. A growl shook the entire chamber. The assassin turned sharply. Too late. Kale crossed the room like a storm. But before he reached them, Lyra screamed. The sound ripped through the air unnaturally. Not loud. Wrong. The silver markings beneath her skin burst brightly across her arms and throat. Then suddenly, the assassin stopped moving. Completely. His body locked rigid beside her. A second later, blood poured violently from his mouth. The man collapsed dead at Lyra's feet. Silence crashed into the room. Lyra stared downward in horror. I did. Nearby guards stumbled suddenly. One dropped to his knees gasping. Another clutched his chest painfully. Even Ronan froze in the doorway, his wolf visibly weakening beneath whatever force had just erupted from Lyra. The air itself felt heavier near her now. Kale looked around the room slowly. Wolves. All of them struggling. Because of her. Then his eyes returned to Lyra. Fear trembled through her entire body as silver light flickered beneath her skin. And for the first time, Kale realized the prophecy might be real. The dead assassin remained sprawled across the stone floor while silence suffocated the room. Nobody touched the body. Nobody moved closer to Lyra. The surviving guards struggled to steady themselves near the doorway, their wolves still weakened beneath the invisible pressure radiating from her trembling figure. Kale stood directly between Lyra and everyone else. Protective instinct burned violently beneath his skin now, sharper than before, dangerous, primitive. His wolf no longer viewed her as merely a mate. It viewed her as something sacred. And that terrified him more than the prophecy itself. Lyra stared at the blood pooling near her feet, breathing unevenly. "I didn't kill him," she whispered weakly. "I swear I didn't." Cale believed her immediately. That was the problem. Because if she had not killed the assassin intentionally, then whatever power lived inside her had acted on its own. Ronan stepped carefully into the room, eyes fixed on the dead attacker. The smell of fear clung heavily to the chamber now. "This cannot stay hidden," he muttered quietly. Cale's expression hardened. "Then hide it." Ronan looked toward him sharply. "Cale. Hide it." The command carried enough force to end the argument instantly. But Ronan already understood something had changed. The Alpha King, who once valued logic above emotion, now stood ready to protect a girl whose existence threatened the stability of the kingdom itself. And worse, Ronan could see the conflict tearing through him. Because Cale was beginning to love her. That realization followed Ronan deep beneath the fortress hours later as he descended into the forbidden archives hidden below Varkura. The underground chambers stretched endlessly beneath layers of ancient stone untouched by ordinary citizens for centuries. Dust covered the walls. Old iron gates blocked sections of forgotten corridors where records too dangerous for public knowledge had been sealed away by royal decree. Ronan carried only a lantern and a silver dagger. The deeper he walked, the colder the air became. Every instinct warned him to turn back. Instead, he continued searching. The words "Moonless Bloodline" echoed through his mind repeatedly. He had heard the legends as a child. Every wolf had. Stories whispered beside fires about pale women who could silence alpha wolves with a glance. Creatures blamed for the collapse of the old empire centuries ago before vanishing from history entirely. Most believed the stories were myths created to frighten young wolves into obedience. Now Ronan was no longer certain. He stopped before a massive iron door marked with ancient royal seals. Forbidden histories. The lock had not been opened in decades. Ronan forced it aside carefully. Dust exploded into the air as the heavy door groaned inward. Rows of old scrolls and books filled the chamber beyond. Some were damaged by time while others remained perfectly preserved beneath layers of protective wax and silver bindings. He searched for hours. Ancient wars. Bloodline records. Royal executions. Then finally, Moonless descendants. Ronan froze. The old parchment crackled beneath his hands as he opened it slowly. Several pages had been deliberately burned. Others stained dark with age. But enough remained readable. His eyes scanned the faded words quickly. The Moonless Bloodline possessed abilities capable of weakening wolf instincts and suppressing transformations. Ronan's heartbeat slowed. Their voices caused pain among high-ranking alphas. Their blood disrupted sacred bonds. He turned another page. And another. Then the final surviving record stopped him cold. The extinction order was carried out under the authority of the old empire after Moonless descendants were blamed for the Black Moon catastrophe. Ronan stared at the words in silence. Extinction order. They were hunted. Not cursed monsters. People. Another line beneath the text appeared written in different ink, as though added later in secret. If any descendants survive, the balance between wolves and mankind will collapse again. Ronan closed the document slowly. For the first time in years, genuine unease settled deep inside him. Because Lyra was not merely dangerous. She represented something ancient the kingdom had tried desperately to erase from existence. Elsewhere above the fortress, storm clouds swallowed the sky over Varkura while Seraphine stood alone inside her chambers, studying the silver markings sketched across old parchment. The resemblance to Lyra was exact. Too exact. A quiet knock sounded against the door. "Enter." Lord Vaylor stepped inside cautiously. The council grows impatient. Seraphine never looked away from the document. Good. They want permission to remove the human. And Cale. He refuses every request. Seraphine's fingers tightened subtly against the parchment. Jealousy twisted sharply beneath her calm exterior now, not simply because Cale protected Lyra. Because he never looked at anyone else the way he looked at her. Seraphine had spent years learning how to command attention inside royal courts. She understood power better than most kings. Yet somehow a frightened servant girl had captured the Alpha King's instincts completely without trying. That made Lyra even more dangerous. She has changed him, Veiler muttered. No, Seraphine answered softly. Her eyes darkened. She revealed what already existed inside him. Meanwhile, several floors above the fortress courtyard, Lyra stood quietly beside a massive balcony window watching snowfall drift across the mountains. The kingdom looked beautiful from this height. Cold. Endless. Lonely. She wrapped Kale's dark cloak tighter around herself while distant torchlights flickered below across the city streets. For the first time in years, nobody had shouted at her today. Nobody threw stones. Nobody called her cursed to her face. Yet somehow she felt more isolated than ever. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Kale entered moments later carrying a silver tray with untouched food. Lyra blinked in surprise. You brought that yourself. Kale placed the tray carefully near the fireplace. The servants refused. Pain flickered briefly across her expression before she hid it. Kale noticed anyway. His wolf reacted instantly to the sadness in her scent. Protect her. Again. Always that same instinct. Lyra moved toward the fire slowly. You don't have to keep pretending this situation doesn't bother you. Kale leaned against the stone wall quietly. I'm not pretending. You fear me. The honesty in her voice caught him off guard. For several seconds, only the crackling fire filled the silence between them. Finally, Kale answered carefully. I fear what may happen to you if the kingdom decides the prophecy matters more than truth. Lyra looked up at him slowly. No king had ever spoken to her gently before. No one powerful had ever sounded concerned for her safety. The realization unsettled her more than cruelty ever had. Kale stepped closer unconsciously. The tension between them shifted instantly. Warmer now. Dangerously intimate. You should hate me, Lyra whispered. Kale frowned slightly. For what? Because everything changed after I appeared. Snow drifted outside behind her while silver firelight danced softly across her face. Kale studied her quietly. The fear in her eyes no longer resembled weakness to him. It resembled loneliness. Something painfully familiar. You are not responsible for what others fear, he said. Lyra swallowed hard. Nobody had defended her before him. Not once. The walls she built around herself for years began cracking slowly beneath his presence. And Kale. Kale realized he no longer wanted distance from her. He wanted proximity. Conversation. Peace. Her safety mattered to him in ways he could no longer explain logically. That frightened him almost as much as the bond itself. Days passed. Then nights. The kingdom outside grew more hostile while the space between Kale and Lyra grew softer. He began eating beside her instead of alone. She stopped flinching whenever he entered a room. Sometimes they stood together silently on the eastern balcony watching snowfall cover the kingdom below without speaking at all. And somehow those quiet moments became the only times Kale's mind felt calm. One evening Lyra laughed softly at something Ronan muttered during supper. The sound startled Kale completely. Not because it was loud. Because he realized he had been waiting to hear it again. Ronan noticed immediately. So did Kale. The Alpha King looked away first. But it was already too late. His wolf had chosen her completely. And his heart was beginning to follow. That same night the bond finally broke the last barrier between them. A violent snowstorm battered the fortress while powerful winds rattled the tower windows. Most of the palace had already gone dark when Kale entered Lyra's chambers after midnight. He found her asleep beside the fireplace. A book rested loosely against her lap while silver light flickered faintly beneath the markings on her skin. Kale stood silently for a long moment. Something painfully gentle moved through him then. Not desire. Not obsession. Something deeper. Belonging. Slowly he crouched beside her. Lyra stirred slightly but did not wake. The mate bond pulsed warmly beneath his skin. Ancient instinct whispered the same truth repeatedly. Mind. Kale brushed several loose strands of hair away from her face carefully. The moment his fingers touched her skin, his control shattered. The wolf inside him surged forward. Before logic intervened, Kale leaned down and sank his teeth gently into the side of her neck. The marking happened instantly. Silver light exploded across the room. Lyra gasped awake sharply as the bond burned between them like fire tearing through flesh. Kale pulled back immediately, breathing hard. Then both of them saw it. The mate mark spreading beneath her skin. Not gold. Black. Pure black. The room turned deathly silent. Ancient fear crashed through Kale's chest. Because every wolf knew the meaning of a black mate mark. Cursed destiny. Death tied to love. Outside the chamber doors, footsteps suddenly thundered through the corridor. Ronan burst into the room moments later, his expression pale with alarm. "The council has gathered," he said urgently. Kale rose slowly. Ronan's eyes landed on the black mark across Lyra's neck. His face drained completely of color. Then came the words neither of them wanted to hear. "The elders have declared Lyra Vale a threat to the kingdom." The fortress of Varkora no longer felt like a kingdom. It felt like a cage moments away from breaking apart. Torches burned through the night across every tower while armed guards flooded the palace corridors under direct orders from the council. Noble banners lined the fortress walls like preparations for war instead of governance. Nobody trusted anyone anymore. Not after the black mate mark appeared. Not after whispers about the prophecy spread beyond the capital into neighboring territories. Fear had infected the kingdom completely. And fear always demanded blood. Inside the council chamber, the high elders argued loudly beneath towering wolf statues while storm winds rattled the stained glass windows overhead. The girl must die before the next moonrise. She has already corrupted the king. The black mark confirms it. Elder Merrick remained silent at the center of the chaos, both hands resting heavily against his cane while nobles shouted over one another around him. Then the chamber doors burst open. Kale entered. Silence crushed the room instantly. The Alpha King walked directly toward the council table without removing the sword strapped across his back. His silver eyes looked colder than steel beneath the torchlight. Several elders noticed the fury beneath his calm expression immediately. That made them nervous. "You entered the sacred chamber armed," one noble muttered carefully. Kale stopped walking. "I entered prepared." Nobody spoke after that. Elder Merrick studied him cautiously. "The council has reached its decision." Kale's voice remained deadly quiet. "You mean your execution order? The girl represents a threat to every wolf alive. She is my mate." A heavy silence followed. Kale rarely raised his voice. He did not need to. The power behind his words alone could silence armies. Merrick exhaled slowly. "Then your judgment has been compromised." Kale's silver eyes darkened. "Careful." The warning settled across the room like a blade against exposed skin. Several nobles lowered their gazes immediately. But Seraphine did not. She stood near the far side of the chamber wearing deep emerald silk, calm and composed despite the tension threatening to explode around them. "The kingdom fears her for good reason," she said carefully. "An assassin died without a wound touching him, wolves collapse merely standing near her, and now the sacred bond itself has blackened." Her gaze lingered on Kale. "You know what that means?" Kale looked at her coldly. "I know fear makes cowards speak loudly." Something sharp flickered behind Seraphine's eyes. "Not pain. Resentment. You are choosing her over your people." Kale stepped closer slowly. "I am choosing not to murder an innocent woman because frightened nobles need someone to blame." The chamber erupted again. "She is not innocent. The prophecy has returned. She will destroy us all." Kale's patience snapped. His wolf surged violently beneath his skin as power exploded outward across the chamber. The silver flames surrounding the council table bent sharply beneath the force of his alpha aura. Every voice died instantly. Even powerful alphas struggled to breathe beneath the crushing dominance filling the room. "If any of you attempt to touch Lyra again," Kale said quietly, "I will bury this entire council beneath the fortress myself." Nobody doubted him. That frightened them even more. Far beneath the palace towers, Lyra wandered through one of the abandoned eastern corridors, unable to calm the storm inside her chest. The black mate mark still burned against her skin. Every time she touched it, warmth spread through her body alongside fear she could barely explain. Mate. The word no longer sounded comforting. It sounded dangerous. She stopped beside an old window overlooking the lower kingdom streets below. Snow drifted heavily across rooftops while distant wolves patrolled the city walls carrying silver weapons. Hunting weapons. For her. A soft voice interrupted the silence behind her. You should not be alone tonight. Lyra turned sharply. Ronan approached slowly through the corridor shadows, carrying several old documents beneath one arm. Unlike most wolves lately, his expression held no hatred. Only concern. Lyra tried forcing a small smile. Everyone says that now. Ronan remained quiet for a moment before handing her the old papers. You deserve to know the truth. The parchment trembled slightly in her hands as she unfolded the first document. Ancient royal records. Names. Locations. Execution orders. Then her eyes found a village name she recognized instantly. Her breathing stopped. Black Hollow. Her home. The page blurred. No, she whispered. Ronan's jaw tightened painfully. The village attack happened 20 years ago during the final purge against suspected Moonless descendants. Lyra stared at the records in horror. Lines of burned houses. Casualty reports. Confirmed extermination. Her fingers shook harder with every word. My mother, she whispered weakly. Ronan looked away briefly before answering. She was listed among the dead. The corridor suddenly felt too small. Too cold. Lyra's chest tightened violently as old memories resurfaced through layers of childhood confusion. Fire-consuming wooden homes. Screaming. Blood in the snow. Large shadows moving through smoke. Wolves. Not monsters from stories. Real wolves. Her knees nearly gave out beneath her. Then she saw the final signature stamped at the bottom of the document. Authorized by Alpha King Lucian Draven. Kale's father. The air left her lungs completely. At that exact moment, Kale entered the corridor from the opposite stairwell. The second he saw the expression on Lyra's face, dread slammed through him. She looked shattered. Ronan's silence confirmed everything instantly. Kale stepped forward carefully. Lyra. Don't. The single word broke something inside him. Lyra backed away slowly, eyes filling with devastation no amount of strength could hide now. You knew, she whispered. Kale's throat tightened. No. The answer came immediately. Truthfully. But it no longer mattered. Tears burned down Lyra's face as she lifted the records toward him with trembling hands. Your family murdered mine. The words struck harder than any blade Kale had ever taken in battle. Because suddenly memories he buried years ago returned violently. His father disappearing for weeks during secret military campaigns. Rumors about royal purges. Entire villages erased from maps. Kale had ignored those whispers his entire life because accepting them meant accepting what the Draven bloodline truly built its throne upon. Murder. Lyra stared at him like she no longer recognized the man standing before her. You told me I wasn't responsible for what others feared, she whispered brokenly. Her voice cracked. But your family made me into this. Kale stepped toward her instinctively. Lyra recoiled immediately. That movement destroyed him more than her words. For the first time since the bond formed, she looked afraid of him. Not because he was powerful. Because he carried the blood of the men who slaughtered her family. Kale's chest tightened painfully beneath the weight of it. I swear to you, he said quietly, if my father ordered that massacre I will answer for it. But Lyra could barely hear him anymore. Grief crashed through her too violently. Pain. Fear. Rage. All of it twisted together beneath her skin until the silver markings across her body suddenly ignited. Ronan's eyes widened instantly. Kale. Too late. Lyra cried out sharply as power exploded from her body like a shockwave. The corridor lights shattered. Windows burst outward across the fortress. A deafening roar echoed through Varkora. Then the sky split open. Red lightning ripped across the clouds overhead, while the moon darkened once more above the kingdom. Wolves everywhere screamed. Inside the palace halls, guards collapsed suddenly to their knees, clutching their chests in agony. Across the city below, entire patrol groups lost control of their transformations mid-shift. Some crashed violently onto frozen streets while others howled in pain beneath the blackening sky. The power spread beyond the fortress walls, through the mountains, across the kingdom itself. Lyra staggered backward as silver light consumed her markings completely. "I can't stop it," she cried. Kale reached her instantly despite the pressure crushing against every wolf nearby. Even his knees threatened to buckle now. The power inside her attacked wolf instincts directly. Ancient. Merciless. Exactly like the forbidden records warned. Ronan collapsed against the corridor wall, gasping for breath. Below the fortress, panic erupted throughout Varkora. "The Black Moon has returned. She's killing us. Protect the children." Chaos swallowed the kingdom whole. Inside the council chamber, nobles struggled to remain standing while red lightning flashed through the windows around them. Seraphine stared upward in horror. The prophecy was real. Elder Merrick gripped the council table tightly. "Send every warrior we have." "To kill her?" another elder asked weakly. Merrick's face hardened. "To survive." Back in the eastern corridor, Kale pulled Lyra against him while violent energy tore through the palace around them. She trembled uncontrollably in his arms. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," she whispered desperately. Kale tightened his hold protectively despite the agony ripping through his wolf. "I know." And he did. That was why he finally understood the terrible truth. The kingdom would never stop hunting her now. Not after this. Not after wolves across Varkora felt her power firsthand. Heavy footsteps thundered through nearby corridors moments later as armed royal guards flooded toward them carrying silver blades and execution chains. Ronan forced himself upright weakly. "Kale." The guards hesitated upon seeing the Alpha King standing protectively before Lyra. Their commander swallowed hard. "The council has ordered the girl surrendered immediately." Kale slowly turned toward them, silver eyes glowing. Storm winds howled violently through the shattered corridor windows behind him while red lightning illuminated the fortress walls. Every guard instinctively stepped backward. Because the expression on the Alpha King's face no longer resembled loyalty to the throne. It resembled war. Kale drew his sword slowly. Steel rang through the corridor. Then came the words that shattered the kingdom forever. "From this moment forward," Kale said coldly, "anyone who comes for Lyra comes through me first." Silence followed. Then somewhere deep inside the fortress, the first battle horn sounded. Battle horns echoed across Varkora through the remainder of the night. The kingdom had split apart before sunrise. Some wolves swore loyalty to the council and demanded Lyra's death before her powers consumed them all. Others remained loyal to Kale alone, refusing to raise weapons against the Alpha King despite the fear spreading through the fortress. And hidden beneath both sides were those far more dangerous. The ones who wanted to control her. Because power capable of bringing alphas to their knees could reshape the world itself. Snow continued falling heavily over the capital while smoke drifted from several lower districts where riots had already begun. Families barricaded doors, warriors armed themselves in silence. The Black Moon watched all of it from above. Inside the fortress, Kale led Lyra through abandoned underground corridors hidden beneath the eastern towers while Ronan followed close behind carrying a lantern and blood-stained sword. The deeper they descended, the older the stone walls became. Ancient carvings covered the narrow passageways now. Symbols older than Varkora itself stretched across the ceilings like warnings left behind by forgotten civilizations. Lyra's silver markings glowed faintly beneath her skin as they walked. The closer she moved toward the underground chambers, the stronger the strange pull inside her chest became. As if something below had been waiting for her. Kale noticed her growing unease immediately. "You're shaking." Lyra lowered her eyes. "I can hear voices." Ronan stiffened. "What kind of voices?" "I don't know." Her breathing trembled softly. "They sound old. Another distant battle horn echoed above them through layers of stone. Kale's jaw tightened. Every minute spent underground allowed the council to gather more forces against them. Yet something inside him knew they needed answers before the kingdom drowned itself in blood. The corridor finally opened into a massive hidden chamber buried beneath the mountain itself. All three stopped immediately. The room looked untouched by time. Silver fire burned silently within ancient wall torches despite centuries buried underground. Giant statues surrounded the circular chamber, each carved into the shape of hooded figures with wolves kneeling at their feet. At the center stood a black stone altar. And behind it, a massive mural stretched across the wall. Lyra froze. The woman painted across the ancient stone looked exactly like her. Same silver markings. Same eyes. Same face. Only the clothing differed. The woman in the mural wore a crown made from black silver while wolves surrounded her beneath a darkened moon. Some bowed willingly. Others screamed in agony. Lyra stepped backward weakly. No. Ronan stared at the mural in horror. This chamber is older than the Empire itself. Kale moved beside Lyra protectively while studying the ancient painting carefully. Then his eyes landed on the symbols carved beneath it. Ancient language. Forgotten by most wolves centuries ago. But Kale recognized enough to understand pieces. He stepped closer slowly. The Moonless Queen shall rise when corruption poisons the blood of wolves. The chamber grew colder. Ronan swallowed hard. Kale continued reading. She was not created to destroy the worthy. His voice slowed. Then stopped completely. Lyra looked toward him fearfully. What does it say? Kale stared at the final line in silence before answering. She was created to judge them. The words settled heavily through the chamber. Lyra's heartbeat staggered painfully. Judge them. Not destroy them. Memories suddenly crashed through her mind without warning. The assassin dying after trying to murder her. Wolves collapsing when hatred and violence surrounded her. The black moon appearing during moments of cruelty and fear. Her powers had never attacked randomly. They reacted. To corruption. To bloodshed. To monsters hiding beneath crowns and noble titles. The realization terrified her even more. Because if the ancient prophecy was true, then her existence itself had been meant as punishment. Ronan stepped closer to the mural carefully. The old empire hunted the moonless descendants because they exposed what wolves became. Kale's expression darkened. Power. Greed. Violence. Everything his own bloodline had built itself upon. Lyra stared at the mural version of herself while tears slowly filled her eyes again. I don't want this, she whispered. The silver markings along her arms flickered painfully. I don't want people suffering because of me. Kale turned toward her instantly. They suffer because this kingdom chose fear over mercy long before you were born. Lyra shook her head weakly. Look what's happening outside. Her voice cracked. Families are terrified, wolves are dying, and every time I lose control it gets worse. Kale stepped closer. You are not the monster here. But what if I become one? The question broke something inside him. Because for the first time since meeting her, Lyra no longer looked frightened of the kingdom. She looked frightened of herself. Kale reached for her carefully. This time she did not pull away. His hand settled gently against her cheek, while silver firelight danced across the black mate mark connecting them both. You know what I see when I look at you? He asked quietly. Lyra's trembling gaze lifted toward his. I see someone who survived horrors that would have destroyed most people. His thumb brushed softly beneath her eye, catching a tear before it fell. I see someone who still feels guilt after being hunted, betrayed, and nearly executed. The chamber around them faded into silence. Even Ronan looked away slightly, giving them privacy without moving farther. Kale's voice lowered. And I see the only person who ever made this kingdom feel less empty. Lyra's breathing caught softly. No throne. No battlefield. No victory in Kale's life had ever felt as terrifying as this moment. Because loving her meant losing everything. And he realized he no longer cared. Far above them, another explosion shook the fortress. The council had begun moving against loyalist forces. War had officially started. Ronan glanced toward the ceiling grimly. We're running out of time. Kale never looked away from Lyra. Then slowly, he reached toward the royal crest fastened near his chest. The symbol of the Alpha King. Silver wolf wrapped in black iron. Every ruler of Varkora wore it. Kale ripped it free. The metal struck the stone floor loudly. Ronan stared at him in shock. Lyra's eyes widened. Kale, I spent my entire life protecting a throne built on fear, he said quietly. The silver flames around them flickered softly. But if keeping that throne means sacrificing you, he shook his head once, then it was never worth protecting. Lyra looked at him like she could barely breathe. Kale stepped even closer until only inches remained between them. I choose you. The simplicity of the words somehow hurt more deeply than grand promises ever could. Because she believed him. Completely. And that frightened her almost as much as losing him would. Kale rested his forehead gently against hers. Outside, battle horns continued echoing through the kingdom. But inside the ancient chamber, the world narrowed into silence and warmth and the impossible bond tying them together. You won't face this alone, Kale whispered. Lyra closed her eyes slowly. You don't know what I may become. Kale's arms wrapped around her carefully. Then I'll stand beside you when you become it. For the first time since the black moon appeared, Lyra allowed herself to lean into him fully. Not because the fear disappeared. Because she no longer carried it alone. Then suddenly, a cold wind swept violently through the chamber. The silver flames extinguished instantly. Ronan turned sharply toward the darkness beyond the corridor entrance. Someone else was there. A tall figure stepped slowly from the shadows wearing a long black cloak dusted with snow. His eyes glowed deep crimson beneath the darkness. Ancient. Predatory. Wrong. The stranger's gaze locked directly onto Lyra. Then a slow smile spread across his face. Interesting, he murmured softly. Kale moved protectively in front of Lyra instantly, hand already reaching for his sword. The stranger barely acknowledged the threat. Instead, his crimson eyes remained fixed on Lyra alone. You truly don't remember, he said quietly. The chamber suddenly felt much colder. Lyra's heart pounded violently. Who are you? The man tilted his head slightly. Then came the words that silenced the room completely. You are not the first Moonless Queen. The underground chamber fell into absolute silence. Even the distant sounds of war above them suddenly felt far away. Kale stood motionless in front of Lyra, one hand gripping the hilt of his sword while cold air swept through the ancient ruins beneath Varkora. Every instinct inside him screamed danger. Not ordinary danger. Something older. The man standing in the shadows did not smell fully wolf. Nor fully human. His crimson eyes glowed unnaturally beneath the darkness while snow melted slowly across the shoulders of his black cloak. Ronan shifted beside the entrance, forcing himself into a defensive stance despite exhaustion pulling heavily at his body. State your name, he demanded. The stranger ignored him completely. His attention never left Lyra. Almost as if Kale and Ronan were irrelevant. Almost as if he had been searching for her for a very long time. Lyra's heartbeat pounded violently against her ribs. There was something horrifyingly familiar about him. Not his face. His presence. Like a forgotten nightmare lingering at the edge of memory. You are not the first Moonless Queen. The words echoed through the chamber again. This time heavier. More dangerous. Lyra stepped backward instinctively. What does that mean? The stranger finally moved. Slowly, he stepped forward into the silver moonlight spilling faintly through cracks in the ceiling above. His features sharpened clearly now. Pale skin. Long dark hair streaked with silver. Ancient scars running across his throat and jawline. And those eyes. Red like fresh blood beneath darkness. Kale's wolf reacted instantly. Not with fear. With hatred. Raw and instinctive. The stranger noticed. A faint smile touched his lips. You carry the Draven bloodline well, he murmured toward Kale. Violent, proud, predictable. Kale's expression hardened immediately. Answer her question. The man tilted his head slightly. The first Moonless Queen nearly destroyed the old empire centuries ago. The chamber grew colder. Ronan's breathing slowed carefully. The wolves feared her power, the stranger continued, so they hunted her people across kingdoms until almost nothing remained. Lyra's chest tightened painfully. The massacre. The purges. Everything connected. She failed, he said softly. Lyra's voice barely worked. Failed at what? The stranger's crimson gaze darkened. At finishing what she started. Silence crashed through the chamber. Then suddenly, a violent tremor shook the fortress above them. Dust rained from the ceiling while distant screams echoed faintly through the underground corridors. The war had reached the palace. Kale stepped closer protectively toward Lyra. Who are you? For the first time, the stranger's expression lost its amusement. Something colder replaced it. Something ancient. I was there when the first black moon rose above the empire, he said quietly. Ronan froze. Impossible. No wolf lived that long. The stranger looked toward the massive mural behind Lyra. The world you know was built on lies, he continued, and soon she will remember all of it. Lyra's silver markings suddenly burned painfully beneath her skin. Images flashed violently through her mind. Fire-consuming cities. A woman standing beneath a black moon while thousands of wolves knelt around her. Blood covering silver hands. Screaming. Death. Lyra gasped sharply and stumbled backward. Kale caught her instantly before she fell. The stranger watched calmly. Yes, he whispered, it's beginning. Kale's patience snapped. He drew his sword fully as silver flames exploded across the ancient chamber. You will speak clearly, he growled, or I will cut the answers from your corpse. The red-eyed king only smiled again. Then the black moon overhead darkened completely. Every torch inside the chamber extinguished at once. Darkness swallowed everything. For one terrible second, only the stranger's crimson eyes remained visible inside the shadows. Glowing. Watching. Waiting. Then suddenly, he vanished. Ronan lunged forward immediately, sword drawn, but the corridor beyond the chamber stood empty. No footsteps. No scent. Nothing. Only freezing wind sweeping through ancient stone. Lyra remained frozen in Kale's arms, breathing unevenly while the silver markings across her skin flickered like dying stars. Kale tightened his hold around her instinctively. But even he could not ignore the terrible realization settling into the silence now. This was bigger than the kingdom. Bigger than prophecy. Bigger than the war beginning above them. Because somewhere in the darkness beyond Varkura, others already knew who Lyra truly was. And they had been waiting for her to awaken. High above the fortress, the black moon loomed over the kingdom once more. Red lightning stretched across the clouds. Wolves howled in fear beneath the storm. And standing deep within the shadows of the underground chamber, Lyra stared upward in shock while the final words echoed endlessly through her mind. You are not the first moonless queen. The screen slowly faded into darkness. And that was only the beginning.